We'll start with, can you give me your full name, your date of birth, and then where you were born?
So Michael Forrest Howard, September 20th, 1953, in Keston, North Carolina.
What were your parents like in your upbringing? What was your relationship like with your mom and your dad?
Well, I think had a very good relationship with both. I think most, at least in my experience, I spent most of my time with mother. Daddy was out working, so she was a stay-at-home mom. We had a invalid brother who was older than I was, so she was tied pretty tight to the house. So she and I spent a lot of time working in the yard together doing so that's where I learned to take care of flowers, plant trees, and do things like that. But dad, he was on the road traveling as a salesman for a feed company. And so the interesting thing is I would spend a lot of time riding with him. He would take me on day trips with him. So there's very few places in eastern North Carolina that I haven't been. So between his work and then with his serving in the church, he was in the first steak in North Carolina was made in eastern North Carolina, not in Raleigh, not in Greensboro, not in Charlotte, down in rural area. And he was in the first state presidency. So on Sundays, a lot of times I was traveling with him to go to different wards and stuff. And at that time, we covered everything from Wilmington to Fayetteville, Goldsboro, Kinston, Harkers Island, all that. So I had a good relationship with them and had a good childhood. Daddy loved to fish. I guess I must have loved to fish. I knew Daddy'd be coming home on Friday from work and we were going to go floundering. So I'd have the gigs out and I'd practice gigging flounder in the yard. And then we'd go there, do that at night, and we'd sleep at night down at the coast. And we get up next morning and fish and come back home about 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon.
Talk to me about these trips that you're mentioning. What did that look like? What was the car like? Do you have any distinct memories of a smell or a visual or anything?
Well, I think the biggest thing I remember and look at is we were poor. We weren't poor in family time and stuff, but we didn't have a lot of extra money. So we had a 1962 Volkswagen, so the Bug, that Daddy had put a trailer hitch on. And the trailer hitch was not one that connected to the chassis of the car, but was one that you put and you put it on the bumper and clamped it on. And we had an old wood boat that was about 12 feet long, about maybe 3 feet wide, and maybe a foot and a half deep, not very big, came to a V in the front. And so we would go down and we'd leave. He'd get home about 5 o'clock, tell Mama he'd change clothes, give her a kiss bye, and we'd jump in the car, me and him take off. We'd head to Swansboro. And we go down, we put in a place called Bull's Place. And by the time we get there, it was just starting to get dark. And this is summertime, so it's 9 o'clock. And we had a little 12.5 horsepower motor on the back. And we would go out, probably about a half mile down the river to a place called Goat Island. And we would go flounder around Goat Island. But sometime during the night, so maybe 11, 12 o'clock at night, we would pull up on the beach of the island and they would be sand fiddles, little small crab that were crawling around. And we would go and pick up 150, 200 of them, put them in a bucket. We get back to the car and we come back through the back side of Camp Lejeune Marine Base. There was a road that went across the Marine Base that civilians could go and get a pass to drive from one side to the other. And when you got to the other side, we'd be at Sneed's Ferry. And we'd go to Sneed's Ferry, and then we'd lay the seats back in the Volkswagen. We'd go to sleep, and we'd sleep for about 3 or 4 hours. About 5 o'clock, 5:30, we'd wake up. We'd put the boat in the water, and we'd go fish for sheephead. We'd use those sand fiddlers to fish with, to catch fish. And then about 2 o'clock, we'd leave and come home. So we'd eat Vienna sausage, pork and beans, spotted meat with cheese crackers or nabs, is what we call them, and we'd have a Pepsi or something to drink. You didn't have bottled water.
Was fantastic.
Yeah.
So tell me about the neighborhood, like physically the neighborhood that you grew up in. We'll jump into the neighbors and stuff in a second, but what was your house like? What was the street like?
Well, we lived in a farming community. Grandpa had donated land back in, I don't know, sometime in the 50s. They had come through and put a new highway through, just like you see today, where they come and put a road through to be able to ease traffic and make it better roads, etc. So they had done that with Highway 258 going from Kiston to Jacksonville. And so he had donated all the land on the other side of that road. He donated a big piece to the church. So the church had been built there on that piece of ground. And then Daddy he had a lot beside that. And I don't know, I don't remember if Grandpa gave it to him or if he paid for it. I think Grandpa, if I remember right, I think Grandpa Howard gave him that piece of ground. And so he had built a house. There was a contractor who was a member of the church named Frank Everett, and he contracted Frank to build this house. And it was it was all cement house. It had a cement floor. It had cement block walls. And so there was no wood other than when you get on top of the house, there was wood to be able to make the roof, and the door frames were wood. Part of the whole deal was this was supposed to be a mouse-proof house because there was no places for them to come in and stuff. And I remember one night we were sitting there in the living room. When you walked in the front door, it was a living room, then a dining room, kitchen, then a utility room back over here with a carport, and then there was 3 bedrooms, one on the left, then the one in the corner, that was Mom and Daddy's, and mine was the one over here on the backside, and one bathroom. And, square footage wise, probably 1,300 square foot, something like that, maybe 14 at the most in that house. But we were sitting there in the living room, and all of a sudden we heard something, and we looked down, and a mouse that we had a chimney fireplace in the living room, and a mouse had come through the top, had come over and had fallen all the way down. That's the first mouse we ever knew that got in the house. That's how he got in. So there you go.
Talk to me about what did the school look like that you went to? Was there a general store? What did that infrastructure look like?
So where we live, once again, we're in the country. And so we were in the Deep Run Township. And Deep Run was a little town about 5 miles away from us. And in Deep Run, which would have been very typical, and I've learned later in life was probably typical throughout the United States, but definitely very typical in the South, is the community was a whole community, meaning that so the school was grades 1 through 12, didn't have kindergarten. It was 1 through 12. We all went to the same school building. We all rode the same school buses to school together. And so you had 3 distinct divisions of the school. You had the main schoolhouse, which was a 2-story with the big columns in front, and that's where the principal's office was, and the elementary classes, the 1 through 4 were on the bottom level, and 5, 6, 7, 8 were on top second story. Then you went over to a middle section that was all brick. You had that, and then you had the main building, the middle building, and the third building. The middle building was vocational, so that's where the ag shop was at. That's where home economics was at. All your vocational stuff took place in that. And then the high school where English was taught, Latin was taught, math was taught, chemistry was taught. That was all the high school building. Then you had the gymnasium. We had a principal who he and his wife had come there in the 40s, the late 30s, early 40s, had graduated from Atlantic Christian College, and today it's called Barton College. And they graduated, come there as young graduates, became the principal. So he was principal for Daddy when Daddy was going through school. His wife, Miss Munn, that's Mr. and Miss Munn. Miss Munn was the English teacher, so she taught Daddy her first class of English was teaching Daddy. Her last class of teaching English was when I was a senior, and she taught me. Then Mr. and Miss Munn retired, and so I've I've known them all my life. Mr. Munn would, well, in later years, there was a grocery store in town. Davenport owned it. It was called Davenport's IGA, and there was a hardware store in town. There was a cafe in town. And that was about it. That was about it at that time.
Tell me about your mom and your dad. What was your dad like?
Hard worker, no nonsense, fairly strict disciplinarian, but he loved to have fun. He loved sports and athletics. It was obvious he loved Mama. He loved the church. He loved the Savior. He wanted to be a good person. Mother was just the sweetest person you ever know. She loved Daddy. She loved the kids. The one thing I always remember about when Daddy leave to go to work every day, he'd give Mama a kiss. And sometimes it was a passionate kiss. So that was kind of, we didn't think anything about it. So a little later when I understood what that meant a little better, they didn't hold back emotions like that in front of us. So we knew they loved each other, and which I think created a safety for all of us. Mother more importantly than Daddy, but both of them loved to get dressed up and look nice when it went out. And Mama, everything had to be, her hair had to be just right, clothes had to be just right. And that didn't change for her whole life. And Daddy was pretty much that same way. I think one of the interesting things is that in his graduating class from high school for Daddy, there was 18 kids. There was 9 girls and there was 9 boys. And they all kept in contact until they started dying, from the day they were in school until the end. And although most of them were of different faiths, there was a time period where you'd talk to some people who were members of the LDS church, and they would say that we were picked on or people give us a hard time. That did not happen to my dad or my mom. They respected Mom and Daddy because they were stalwarts in the community, and all the community people, our best friends were Mr. Oliver and Miss Ann, and him and Daddy had played baseball together, basketball together. They coached basketball together at the high school. I remember one of the things was interesting. We had a minor league team in Kinston, which is the closest big city, about 10 miles away. And at that time, Kinston was an affiliate of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And they, like I say, they were Class A in the town of Kinston, which at that time was about 15,000 people. They led the United States of all minor league teams. And this is going up against Sacramento, Rochester, New York, teams like this. We had more people attend minor league games in Kinston than anywhere else in the United States in 1962. That's when Steve Blass and these guys Steve Blass was a big pitcher for the Pirates. Probably one of the highlights was that there was a member of the church named Vernon Law. He was from Idaho, and he pitched for the Pirates, and he had won the 1961 World Series. The Pirates had won the World Series in 61, and he pitched the championship game. He was their top ace pitcher. And it was funny because we used to listen to him. We could get the Pittsburgh station, KDKA, out of Pittsburgh, so we'd listen to Pittsburgh Pirates. And we always listened in because we had the Pirates affiliates, so we knew a lot of the men that had come through had played, just about all played in Kinston before they got to the big team. We knew names. A guy by the name of G. Michael played in Kinston for 3 years. and went on to Pittsburgh play and ended up being the coach and then the general manager of New York Yankees. And so we always felt like we knew Jimmy Michaels because we'd watched him for 3 years, be around. But but in '61, when Vernon Law was pitching in the World Series, he hurt his arm and it wouldn't get well. And when '62 came, he was still pitching and his arm just wouldn't get well. And they sent him down to Class A into Kinston because they wanted to be in some hot, humid weather so his arm would loosen up, not put as much tension on it. So we had a major leaguer who had won the World Series before pitching in Kinston. And him being a member of the church and Daddy being in the state presidency, we got to meet Vernon Law one on one personally. And he gave me a signed baseball with Vernon Law on it. I promptly went out and played baseball with it. So I don't have that baseball today. But I remember he was pitching in Kinston. He had pitched for 9 innings. His arm was feeling good that night. And he come up, Kinston was behind by 2 runs. He come up and either the bottom of the 8th or the bottom of the ninth, 2 people on, and Vernon Law, of all people, the pitcher, hit a home run and won his own ball game. So there you go.
That's a cool story.
It is.
My goodness.
That was a fun time.
Do you have any other memories like that from your childhood? I mean, that's a pretty monumental one. That's a pretty big one, but were you kind of a rebel as a young man, early teens?
I don't think I'd be considered a rebel. Maybe a little bit. Well, first of all, when I was growing up, when I was young, I was heavy. When I was in 6th and 7th grade, 8th grade, some of my classmates today, we would call it, we'd probably refer to it as bullying or whatever, but they nicknamed me Fatty and stuff like that, and I'd tell them where they could go once in a while. I weren't afraid to do that, but I knew I wanted to be an athlete and I loved to play basketball. And until 1964, we didn't have football in our area. In 1964, we consolidated so that when I described Deep Run School as being 1 through 12, in the county that we were in, the Neuse River goes through the middle of the county. So everybody on the north side of the river went to a high school. Now it was going to be called North Lenore. Everybody on the south side of the river went to a high school that was going to be called South Lenore because we lived in Lenore County. So there was a city school. Now there's 2 high schools. So, for example, there was a high school in Moss Hill. There was a high school in Deep Run. There was a high school in Pink Hill. And there was a high school at Southwood. Now, all 4 of those schools were consolidated for the high school into one, and it was put in Deep Run, and that became South Lenore High School. And so one of the things that happened was that football was introduced. So in 1965 was our first football team. And I had a cousin who was older than I was, and Gramps, he played football, so I wanted to be like Gramps. So my freshman year, that fall in August when school started, or before school started, football practice started, I went to football practice. I had never done so many calisthenics and running and stuff. And in about a 3-week period of time, I lost 35 pounds and I weren't fatty no more. I was still short, but I weren't fat. So as my freshman year in high school, I played football on the JV team. But come baseball season, I tried out. I made the varsity team. And so I played varsity baseball my my freshman year, and played all 4 years of baseball, 2 years as JV. And then during my sophomore year, I got called up to varsity. And so I played varsity junior and senior year. My high school coaches were all very close with each one of them. Once again, they were people we knew. The girls basketball coach, who Shanna played for, he was also assistant football coach, but him and Daddy fished together. So I'd known Mr. Hartsell for a long time. Mr. Salter's wife had taught me 7th grade and 8th grade. I knew Mr. Salter via his wife. And Mr. Davis, I didn't know till I got there, but I had an older buddy, Cobb, Turner, who played baseball for the high school team, and Mr. Davis thought he walked on water because he was about 6'2" and could throw about 93-mile-an-hour fastball. Later went on to play at BYU in baseball. So, I would say all in all, the closest probably I was to a rebel was my junior year and senior year. I was busy playing sports, especially my senior year, so I wouldn't go to seminary. We had to get up at 6 o'clock and go to the church building to go to seminary, which was 5 miles away. And so go do that and then come back 5 miles and go back to school. So I did it up to my junior year, but my senior year I didn't do it. Mom and dad didn't make me because I weren't being a bad boy, and they knew I was trying to finish my senior year out, play sports, get everything because I was getting ready to go to college, and so they knew that was going to solve when I got to Rick's. That would take care of the church stuff. So,
What was your favorite dish your mom would cook for you?
well, if you just say favorite dish, the first thing would be banana pudding.
Yeah.
That's the first thing come to mind. But Mama could cook anything, but she was especially good at cooking. She would cook fried chicken. The other thing was when she made a meal, she may have 5 vegetables going with. We would have squash, we'd have corn, we'd have string beans, we'd have butter beans, we'd have sweet potatoes, we might have iced potatoes. It just depended. But and in the summertime, it was not unusual for her to cook 7 or 8 vegetables. We not even have meat, and we didn't do that because we were vegetarians. We just like vegetables. Of course, vegetarians couldn't cook a meal like she cooked because when she cooked her vegetables, she'd put a little pork side in it and these type of deals. So they probably wouldn't like that, but it sure made stuff taste good. Sunday dinners was either fried chicken, we'd have a pot roast. She'd always fix a pot roast with it. And then because we fished a lot, we'd eat a lot of fish. And so she'd do that. She'd make potato salad, coleslaw, hush puppies, and you didn't go hungry around mama.
Talk to me about the relationship you had with your siblings. If you could list out their names and then maybe a memory that got up each one.
Well, Monty was my older brother. Monty was an invalid when he was born. So what that meant was he couldn't walk, he couldn't talk. He was always in a diaper. He had to be hand fed. So he was, for all intents and purposes, he was a baby. And so we lived right beside the church. So we go to church. He couldn't roll off a bed. He couldn't roll over. He weren't going to go anywhere. So mom would feed him, put a new diaper on him. He slept on a regular sized bed. Mama would lay him on that bed, and we go to church. And when sacrament was over with, she'd come. Or at that time, we would have Sunday school. We'd go to priesthood meeting at 8:30 to 10, and then or 8:30 to 9:30, and then 10 o'clock we'd start Sunday school and have Sunday school from 10 to 11:30. And then we'd come home and go back to church at 6 o'clock at night. And so you're only leaving if mom was worried about him. She'd just all she had to do is walk out church, walk over to the house, check on him, and but the interesting thing was we come home from church, and when he'd hear the door open, he would let out a sound. He was letting us know that he knew we were there, and we'd always run in there and talk to him, and he would smile. You get him to smile and stuff. So I grew up with him, and he was at home until he was about 13, 14 years old. Then he went into Castle School in Kiston, which was a state school for mentally handicapped or handicapped children and young adults. But he was in a specific building that was for kids who were like him. And you were not allowed to go in that building until you were 14. So he had been there for about a year and a half before I was finally allowed to go in. I'd go with mother to go see him. She would bring him out, and we would sit in the breezeway and talk to him and just sit there with him, and she'd hold him. And we'd probably be there an hour or so, and then she would take him back and go put him back in his bed. But she'd tell me about all the other children or young men. As it turned out to be, they was 30 years old, but they were severely mentally handicapped or physically handicapped, or really both, that she'd tell me about each one of these people. And when I turned 14, I was able to go in, and it was just unbelievable what I saw.
In a good way or in a bad way?
Well, it was a good way in that it makes you appreciate the physical and mental attributes that you had. It wasn't a bad, it was sad. You walk in, and the first guy on the right, he had water on the brain. So if your head should be this big, his head was that big. He was blind, but he was always talking. He was always saying, "It's a thundering and a lightning. It's a thundering and a lightning." The nurses tell me that he would hear stuff in his head and stuff, and that's why he thought was doing that. There was one young man that was about the same age as our brother's name was Amos Jr., but we called him Monty. Looked exactly like him, facially wise, etc., and body wise. And I remember there was another man that was setting up in his, and this was a man. This guy was 35. He was 30, 35 years old. He had a heavy beard. I mean, they had to shave him every couple of days. And he had a heavy beard, black hair, and all their hair was just cut short to their head. And it's just very vivid. I remember that. So Monty died when he was about 18 years old. Every spring they would take him and carry him out in the breezeway to get fresh air and sunshine. And he would catch a cold every spring. And this particular spring, he caught a cold. The mucus had built up in his lungs. He didn't have the muscles to be able to cough it out. They'd walk through them every 30 minutes to make sure they're okay and stuff. And they had just checked him. They left, and when they come back, he had died. And he had mucus. It was in his lungs, and he couldn't get it out, and it just cut his air off, and he literally drowned in his own mucus in his lungs. But the truth is, for him to pass and go to the other world was actually a blessing for him that he didn't have to be there anymore. He didn't have to worry about him anymore. Then Shanna was born. Shanna's 4 years younger than I am. I don't know that I remember her until she was probably 2 years old or so walking. It was just the two of us and mom and daddy. But Shanna, when we were growing up, as we started getting a little older, she started to be 6, 7 years old. I was playing baseball, so me and her would play catch together. I'd pitch to her, she'd pitch to me, and that's how she became a good athlete. Because we just played together all the time. We'd have baseball games in our backyard. We'd play basketball in the back. Well, we had a basketball goal behind the church, so we go down there and play. And that's how she became a really good basketball player and a really good baseball, softball player. Because she played with the boys all the time, because that's all there was around for her to play with. So that's what we did. And it weren't, we didn't think about it of her being a tomboy. It was just her doing what was natural, and that's what we did. And then we had gone to Baltimore to visit Daddy's sister, Aunt Ruby. Daddy had Aunt Ruby lived in Baltimore. Uncle Edward, Daddy's brother, lived in Washington, D.C. area suburbs. So we went up to visit him, stay with Aunt Ruby. Aunt Ruby took in foster children. She had a little boy about 18 months old named Jamie, probably 9 months old, because he was just a baby. And Mama fell in love with him, and she wanted to have. So her and Daddy started talking with Aunt Ruby, trying to work out how could you adopt this baby? What'd you have to do? During the meantime, Mama became pregnant unexpectedly. They'd been trying to have another child and just no luck at all. And so she got pregnant, and Mickey Joe was born. She was 40 years old, and Mickey Joe's born. And about a year later, she's pregnant a second time. And that's when Chad was born. She was 42. And Dot LaPrade told her, said, "Miss Howard, no more children. You're 42 years old." Now, today, women have children all the time. They don't even have their first child till they're 40, 42 years old. Still a little bit uncommon, but that's when they came. So we always referred to it, Mom and Daddy had two families. Had me and Shannon and Monty, and then they had Chad and Mickey Joe, or Mickey Joe and Chad. So they were always younger. So like when Darlene and I got married, Mickey was 8, Chad was 6, maybe 9, 7, something like that.
Do you have a fond memory with Mickey Joe and Chad?
Yeah, I mean, they were all fond memories with them. It was kind of interesting in that I'm 15 years older than Chad, 12 years older than Mickey. And so I was almost like their second dad. I mean, I would discipline them. I'd have them sit in a corner. If they need a whipping, I'd make sure they got one. And sometimes mom would reprimand me, and sometimes mom say, "Now you listen to what Mike tells you, and he won't have to whip you no more." And of course, when we said whipping, it was spanking them on the butt with a hand. We weren't hurting them real, you know, maybe they need to be hurt, but they weren't hurt. A funny story on Mickey, as they got old enough to start playing little league basketball, so they're 9, 10 years old, somewhere along there. Mickey Joe, we go play basketball. They'd go shoot a foul shot, and he'd be standing on the foul lines while somebody's shooting the foul shot. If you watched him very long, he'd always reach down, scratch himself, pick at himself, and mom would say, "Mickey Joe, get your hands up there." And and Daddy coached Little League Baseball. He helped coach the Little League Baseball team. Mickey Joe, he'd be out there playing first base, and I'd hear Daddy holler, "Mickey, quit looking at the butterflies and watch the darn batter." Because there'd be a moth up from the lights, and he'd be looking there at him, and he was always that way. Uh, Chad, we gone into the grocery store business about the time Chad was probably 2, 3 years old. I think he was about 2 years old, 2.5. And so we lived on one side of the road and the store was on the other side of the road. And this was the Highway 11, which was the main road coming from Kinston to Pink Hill. We were in the town Deep Run. And so we had a lot of trucks come through there and stuff. And he stepped out in front of a truck, and Daddy was watching, and he can't get to him, and he just knows he's going to be hit with that truck and killed. And all of a sudden, he just moved back really fast. Daddy believes something helped him move, but he got out in front of that truck and he was okay. Then when he started playing baseball, he had a really good eye for the ball. And so Mr. Hartzell, who we mentioned earlier, he would help some because he had a son playing at the same age of Chad. So they're playing together. So Mr. Hartzell would pitch to him. Mr. Hartzell would throw a curveball, and he'd be throwing just fastballs to him or throwing the ball straight. And then he'd throw a curveball just to see if, and he'd throw in chance, you changed your pitch, didn't you? He'd pick up on it. So that's some interesting things that we did as we're growing up.
Now, you mentioned the grocery store. I've heard a little bit about the grocery store. You have a funny story or a funny memory?
I'll tell you an interesting thing about the grocery store. So Daddy had worked in the feed and seed business, selling farmers feed for their hogs, their chickens, mostly hogs and chickens, a few cows around, but you didn't have a lot of cows and no other animals to speak of at that time. So he was doing that, but he'd sell them their tobacco seed to grow tobacco. He'd sell them their corn seed, their soybean seed, and that was the main three crops were being grown. And so he knew every farmer in eastern North Carolina. He knew everybody. He sold them all. In any little small store, he sold feed and stuff too. But as that all kind of got worked out, things started changing in that business. And the guy that he worked for 10 years, Mr. Carl Gurley at Gurley Milling Company, Mr. Carl had really taken good care of Daddy and really give him a really pretty good runway to project to be able to increase in pay, etc. Mr. Carl had a brain aneurysm, ended up dying. And when he died, his brother took over. Alton came in, his brother, and he was strictly business and he had no personality. We're not doing this program anymore. We're not doing that program anymore. This is what you're paid. And we're not paying you any extra. And that's when Daddy said, I've had enough of this. And he tried a couple other places that just didn't work. And so we had a small grocery store in a little small town. And I say town, really almost like a bus stop area. in Jonestown, but we had a little country store. So Daddy cut his teeth on that country store. His daddy had a country store about 6 miles up the road. And so he understood that part of it. So he went in and started this store. Of course, he'd been going in and out these stores selling feed and see. Because used to, your community store, you didn't have 7-Elevens. You had community stores that people ran, and they'd have food. But they'd sell feed, they'd sell seed, they sold everything, and a little bit of hardware, a little bit, because you didn't have specialized stores like you do today. And so anyway, he got started in this little store, and he went in, he built shelves, he set up like a grocery, a small grocery store, and did pretty well in it. I was a sophomore in high school, and I was playing football. And after football practice of afternoon after school, I come up with the big grocery store in town, Davenport's IGA, was about a quarter of a mile from the school. So I'd walk up to the school or to this grocery store, and I'd ask Mr. Davenport, can I use the phone to call Mama to come get me? I was through football practice. And of course, the answer was always yes. So I called Mama, said, Mama, I'm done. Come get me. She said, okay. I was about 15 years old, so I hadn't started driving just yet. And so she's on her way to get me. I knew it's going to be 10 minutes or so. And so I'm sitting there talking to Mr. Davenport. And I said to him, I said, this is really a nice store you got here and stuff. This is exactly the kind of store my daddy needs. I said, if he had this kind of store, he'd be able to do good. He said, you know what? Your daddy would do real good in this store, at a store like this. I said, yeah, I think so. Because he was very aware that daddy had in the little store. We were 6 miles. There was Highway 11, there was Highway 258, and they're 6 miles apart. And so anyway, what I didn't know, and what most people didn't know, Mr. Davenport, he was in financial difficulty in the grocery store. He had a son named Neil, that Neil and I grew up together. Neil was an excellent pianist. As a matter of fact, if you went online today and put in Neil Davenport, and it comes up, you would see that Neil Davenport was an excellent pianist, and he loved country music. He wrote country music. He went to Nashville, and he played with all the big boys. He played with Charlie Pride. He played with Johnny Cash. You start naming them. He wrote songs that some of these guys took and did, and he did that for 35 plus years. Then he retired, come to Charlotte, and today he plays music for weddings and stuff, and he's 73 years old today, but he's still playing, he's been all over the world playing music. That's what he was focused on, was getting Neil to Nashville. And he was in trouble in the store because he weren't paying attention to the store. And he was in financial difficulty. I didn't know that, but I just made the statement that Daddy would do good. Well, the next day he called Daddy up saying, so I want to talk to you. Can you come see me? Daddy said, yeah. So Daddy come over. So long story short, in about a month, Daddy bought that store. Wow. That's how we got in the big grocery store business. Now, the interesting thing is Quinn Wholesale was the IGA supplier for all the food and stuff for IGA and independent stores. Mama's brother, Uncle Roger, he was in the store business in Kinston that was 12 miles away. He dealt with Quinn Wholesale as an independent buyer. And so Daddy wanted to be an independent, so therefore we named the Uncle Roger store was Henderson's Food Center. Our grocery store was Howard's Food Center. And we bought from Quinn Wholesale. He owed Mr. Quinn, I don't know how much money, it was a substantial amount, not a crazy amount, but it's enough that Daddy couldn't pay him. He couldn't get the money to pay him. He owed Carolina Dairies, which was the ice cream and milk company. He owed them money. And there was somebody else he owed money to. And so Daddy called Mr. Quinn up and said, Mr. Quinn, I'm now on this store. I can't pay you what Horace owes you. But if you'll work with me, I will pay you and you'll get all your money back. But I got to be able to get groceries to put in the store. So Mr. Quinn said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. You ordered, and when you get there, you got to write a check to pay for the order I'm bringing to you. And I'll bring you food. He says, no, what you owe me, you pay me what you can until we get it paid. And Daddy Daddy said, well, I'll pay you $100 a week. And then when I can get to pay you more, I'll pay you more till I pay you off. Mr. Quinn said, okay. He went to Mr. Carl over at Carolina Dairies, Carl Edwards, and said same thing. And Mr. Carl said the same thing. So that's how we got started in grocery business. It took about 6 years to get it all paid off, but he paid it all off. And so that's how we grew up in the grocery store business. An interesting side note is fast forward 40 years from that period of time. That was 1969. I'm on an airplane and getting on an airplane in Greensboro. I walk into the airport and I see this gentleman, and he looked like he was 75, 80 years old, very dignified, dressed to the T. And I said, I don't know who he is, but he must be somebody because he looked like somebody. Well, I did a lot of traveling, so I usually got upgraded. And this particular day, I was upgraded. So when I got on the plane, this guy's sitting in first class. I looked at my ticket. I'm sitting beside him. So I go in and sit down. He's got a pin on his coat, and it says IGA on it. Well, as soon as I saw it, I knew what it stood for, Independent Grocery Association. So I sat there and I said, I'm assuming you're associated with Independent Grocery Association. He said, oh, you know what IGA means? I said, well, sure. He said, how would you know that? I said, well, I grew up in the grocery store business. Where's your grocery store at? I said, in Eastern North Carolina. I said, a little town called Deep Run. I said, we used to be an IGA store, and then when we bought it, we became independent. I said, but Quinn Wholesale was the IGA company that had all the food. And I said, we bought for them as an independent buyer. And he says, so you know Melford Quinn? I said, well, I know Mr. Melford. I said, my dad knows Mr. Melford really well. He said, well, I just talked to him. He says he's 90 years old. He's still alive and kicking. I said, well, that's cool. I said, well, what do you do with IGA? Oh, I'm retired. What did you used to do with IGA? I weren't going to let it go. I did some work for them and stuff. He says, I said, well, how many years you at IGA? Well, a little over 30 years. I said, well, that's a long time. So we kept talking a little bit more. I said, well, what did you specifically do for IGA? He said, well, I was the CEO. It had already come out and they were talking. He was from High Point, which is a town right there in Greensboro. And he graduated from a school up in Michigan. I said, how did you end up in High Point? He says, I'm a minister. He says, and I came down to start a church in High Point. He says, and I knew some of the guys that worked for IGA. He says, and I came down, we were successful in getting our church started here, and he's a very successful minister in High Point. And he says, they called me up and asked me if I'd be on the board of directors. He says, I was on the board of directors, and I eventually became the CEO of the company. I said, oh. So now you think it's case. So then he turns to me and said, what do you do? I said, well, I work for Ecolab. I said, here in town, if you knew Ecolab, he said, I know K Chemical. I said, yes, that's correct. He said, do you know Bobby Mendez? I said, of course I know Bobby Mendez. He's president of our division. Bobby and I were really close, good friends. And Bobby ran our food service division, which took care of grocery stores. That's how he knew this guy. He said, Bobby's a character. I said, yeah. I said, that's kind of sweet. And we're just flying from Greensboro to Atlanta. So it's a little over an hour flight. So we kept talking, and I said, well, my brother-in-law is president of Western Food, or Fleming Food, in the Western U.S. And he says, your brother-in-law? I said, yeah. He says, Terry Rogers? I said, yeah, that's my brother-in-law. He says, wife Dina, got a little girl named Morgan? Yes. I said, you named them all. He said, do you know when they were looking at a job in Asia? I said, yeah, they went to Singapore. He said, I'm the one that carried them to Singapore. So now we've made that connection. We started talking about church. He said, well, what church do you go to? I said, well, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he started naming off members of the 70 and one of the quorum of the 12. And one name he threw out was Thomas S. Monson. And I knew every name he's talking about. I said, well, and a couple of them I'd met personally, and most of them I hadn't, but I obviously knew exactly who they were. And I said, so how would you know? He said, oh, he says, I'm on national board for the Boy Scouts of America, and your church is one of the biggest supporters of the church. He says, and I work directly. He said, I've been to Salt Lake many times working with these individuals out on the national board of Boy Scouts. And it was just so anyway, that all came from being in the grocery store business as small grocery store in Eastern North Carolina.
Let's talk about, where did you go to college? What did you study?
So getting out of high school, I was limited where I could go to school because the one thing I had not done in high school, I had not applied myself very much when it comes to scholastic. And so as a result, I knew I was limited on where I could go to school. But I also knew that Ricks College, which is Church's junior college up in Idaho, as long as you had a pulse, they'd take you. So I said, well, I'm going to Ricks. So I filled out an application, sent to Ricks. You had to take the ACT to be able to go to Ricks. I hadn't taken the ACT, and even when I got to Ricks, I hadn't taken the ACT. So I took the ACT when I got to Ricks. So it didn't make any difference what you scored on it. You were still going to school. But I think one of the interesting thing was I'd played baseball in high school. I'd played baseball for the Legion, and I wanted to play baseball at Ricks, and Ricks had a pretty good baseball program. And so I'd started writing Coach Schiss, who was the head coach. I'd been writing him stuff, and I would send him clips. You didn't have video or stuff like you do today that you could send. So anytime I played a game, the next day the box score and about the game would be in the newspaper. And so I'd get a paper and I'd cut it out. If I made an error, I'd cut the error section out so it only showed hits and that you went 2 for 3 or 3 for 5 or whatever you did. And I hit the ball really well. So I'd send an article to talk about, that I had come up in the bottom of the seventh. We were 2 down, got a base hit, scored 2 runs, tied us up. Anything was positive. I knew not to send negative stuff. And I would send those to Coach Schiss. And of course, that's the only way he'd never talk to me other than just corresponding back and forth 2 or 3 times and me sending stuff to him. We'd never talk. And so I got school, started school, we had a fall baseball program, and it was a class. There we got 65, 70 people signed up for that class. And it was really designed for those people that were going to be playing baseball to be able to have fall practice, to be able to getting ready for the spring. I'll never forget, he starts out by saying, welcome to fall baseball, and you got a half a credit for attending this class. He says, if you're here just because you want to take the baseball class, you're welcome to be here. If you're here because you want to be on the team, unless I know who you are and we have communicated, or unless you got an arm like Johnny Bench or you can hit like Mickey Mantle, you won't be on this team. He says, you're still welcome to stay here, but if you want to drop this class and pick up another class, you can do that. And that's what he was hoping. Get rid of them. You just have the ones that's going to be there. And about probably had 20 or so to drop right out because they realized it weren't just an intramural deal. This was the real deal. So, but the next thing that happened was what's most interesting to me. He called roll because he had a list of everybody that signed up. He's calling the roll. Dave Cadill. Dave Cadill was our starting shortstop last year. He was the leader of our team and great expectations this coming year. And anybody that played or anybody that he knew that was coming in, he would say something about him. So, we start to get to the H's. So I'm curious to see what's going to be said, right? Because it's going to tell me real soon, well, I even got a chance of making this team. He said, Mike's from North Carolina. Played high school varsity for 4 years. Had a 485 batting average for his Legion team this summer. We look forward to having Mike here with the team. And I said, okay, I got a chance. Ah. And so I did. I ended up playing baseball there. And so I was there for a year, went on my mission and came back, played there a second year. And that's when I met Darlene. But that's where going to start my school at Ricks.
What did you study?
Business administration. I wanted to be a business major. I was planning on going back home, going into store business with Daddy. And, Mr. Milford talked to Daddy about expanding because Daddy knew how to manage a store. He did very well doing that. Mr. Milford understood. That Daddy understood finances. He understood how to take care of customers. And so he had taken this store in the middle of nowhere and done very well with it and had it as one of the, for that size of store, one of the top producer stores. So Mr. Milford come to him and said, "Hey, I want to build a store over here. I want to build a store over here. I'll do all the financing. Would you be interested? But you got to take on the debt. So I'll finance it, but you're the one's got to pay for it. You're on the line." And Daddy had everything paid for. He had the two younger boys. I'll never forget. I went to him talking to him. He says, "Oh, I can't just go do anything. I got the two young boys thinking about I got to provide schooling for them." Daddy was afraid to take a chance. He was making decent money, but he was making more money than he ever thought he'd be able to make. And he was living the best he had ever lived in all of his life. It was real interesting. Before I went on my mission, we were fishing like I described earlier. When I come home from my mission, during my mission, I get a picture and he's bought a new boat with an 85 horsepower motor on, 16-foot boat. We'd never had anything like that. He was going down Pamlico Sound to fish. He was going different places. We never could do that because we didn't have the money to pay for the gas and the boat and everything he needed. And now he's doing, when I come home, the biggest change. Dave said, "You want to go fishing?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, let's try Sneads Ferry to catch some trout." I said, "Okay." So we had to go down to Jacksonville, down to Sneads Ferry. We get to Jacksonville. We said, "Well, let's pull over here and let's go have dinner and then we'll go out and fish." We ain't never stopped at a restaurant in my life like that. And we're stopping there going fishing. We're stopping at a restaurant and we're going to sit down and eat and then we're going to go fishing. We're not going to have Vienna sausage, potted meat, and crackers, nabs. We were sitting there eating fried seafood or whatever the special day was. I said, something changed because he finally had some money. But he would not take chances to go out of the grocery store. Me and Darlene got married. We worked in the grocery store with him for the first almost 2 years. And it was very obvious that we weren't going to do any other stores. And I mean, it was pretty good little setup. You hear the numbers, you'll say, "Well, I don't know about this," but so I got $150 cash a week. Daddy paid Social Security on top of that. So it was straight out. I got $150. He paid Darlene $100 a week. So we're getting $250 a week. So $12,000 a year. But we had gas tanks at the gas station or at the grocery store. We had gas. So we got all the gas. We didn't have to pay for gas. Anything we wanted to eat, and it didn't make any difference what we got. We had all the food we'd ever be able to eat. When we got ready to go fishing, I walked out to our storage place. We had a freezer full of frozen shrimp. I'd pick up shrimp. I'd get the boat. I'd fill it up, and we'd go fishing. I didn't have to pay for none of that. So when you put all things in perspective, it was at that period of time, we were renting a house that one of our friends, he had an old house that had 10 rooms. He'd cut it in half, made 2 apartments out of it. We rented the apartment. We paid $75 a month. And so when you just put everything in perspective, we were doing okay. Well, but you could see that that's what it was going to be. And is that where you wanted to be? And I wanted to do better. And so I had Cobb Turner, my friend, was working for UPS. And when I was talking to him, he's making $25,000+ a year working for UPS. And at that time, they were making about $11 an hour, and then time and a half for anything over 8 hours a day. And so I ended up going to work for UPS, and so I worked 2 years for them. My second year, the end of the year, I made $30,000, and this 1978. And so I was making really good money, making $30,000 a year. I had 2 weeks paid vacation. I had 5 personal holidays that were paid. I had 5 sick days that were paid. So I had a month off. So I worked 11 months a year, Monday through Friday. And Our benefits, we had complete coverage for hospitalization. Didn't cost us anything, or it was $15, $16 a month, whatever it was. It wasn't. We paid $18 a month for union dues because we were a union company. So I was Union 391. So that's what gave us the pay that we had. They raised our pay to almost it was 12.50, $13 an hour. And then when you put time and a half, we would get $20 an hour to be able to go, and that's why I make $30,000 a year. Then I left to come to the farm to work for Dallin. I got paid $800 a month, and of course he furnished the house. But other than that, I paid for everything else. Dave told you the craziest person I ever seen. He told me he said why would you leave what you're doing? But that's what we did.
Curious to hear your story of how you met Darlene and what courtship looked like before you guys got married.
So I finished my mission. I come back and I went to Rick's playing and going to school. And so I was playing baseball. And one of the guys I had played with my freshman year, he was there for the fall. I met him, got to know him really well. His name was Pat Gallagher. He was from Durango, Colorado. And Pat had left in January to go on a mission, and I'd played that spring. When he come home from his mission, he got home in the fall, and then he played the following spring. That was his first year playing. So when I got home, he was there that fall, and I was there, and we were going to play together in spring, which we did. But when Pat had got home, he had met this girl, he got married, and so they had a trailer park at that time for newlyweds. He was renting one of those trailers, and him and his wife was there going to school, and she was working. She was working at school to make money while he was going to school playing baseball, and she was secretary for student body officers. And Darlene was one of the student body officers. She was vice president of activities. She had run a campaign her freshman year to get elected, and her last name being Reese, she had these little Reese cups. And she'd go out to everybody and she would say, vote for Reese, and she'd hand them a Reese cup. On election day, remember, Reese. And all of her cronies that were helping her, that's what they were doing, giving away candy. And, name recognition made a big deal. And she got elected. Didn't nobody really know her. And she'll tell you, she didn't know that many people, but that name recognition made it. And they voted for her, and she became vice president of student activities. So one day I was in the Memory Center and come by the snack bar, that student building there at Rick's. And I come by the snack bar and I saw Mary Lee, Pat's wife, sitting there, and she had these three girls sitting with her. And this one girl was especially attractive. And I walked over to Mary Lee to say hi to her, with figuring that she would introduce me to these three girls. Well, Mary Lee said, well, hey, Mike, how are you? I said, I'm fine, Mary Lee. How you doing that fuck? And she ain't said nothing about introducing me to these girls. Well, I didn't want to let Darlene know I was really eyeballing her. So I said to all of them, I said, well, obviously, Mary Lee doesn't think enough of me to introduce me to you girls. So I'll introduce myself to you. My name's Mike. I know Mary Lee because her husband and I play baseball together. So it's all out there on the table, right? And so I said, so what's your name? And I started with a girl I could care less what her name was. So name was Carol. Can't think of the girl now, Canada. And she introduced herself. Then Darlene introduced herself. So I said hi, and then I said bye to him, and I left. That afternoon at baseball practice, I said to Gallagher, I said, Pat. He said, yeah. I said, the Reese girl that works with your wife and the student body officers. He said, yeah. I says, is she dating? Is she available? What's the deal? He said, I don't know. I'll ask Mary Lee and I'll let you know. Next day at practice, he cut it to. He says, she's available. I says, okay. So that was on Thursday. On Friday, Thursday. So Friday, I went upstairs to the office. I knew people who were officers on the student body council. So I went up to hi them, and I went straight to her office, reintroduced myself to her, and they ran a deal where they had told everybody what was going on for the weekend for activities. It was broke, so she was physically doing it over the microphone or doing it through her phone, but it would go out over the speaker system on the campus. So she was doing that. And she says, and Friday night, there'll be pillow movies at Manwaring Center at 7 o'clock. So with her speaking on the deal with speakers, I said, so are you going to go to that with me? And she looked up at me and she had to get back and finish her. So she got back, she finished her deal and hung the phone up. She says, that when I said, so are you going with me to the pillow movies? She says, well, yeah, I'll go. So that's how we had our first date. So I went to go pick her up at the apartment. The thing didn't start till like 8 o'clock, or maybe it started 7:30. We didn't want to go till 8. They had TV with cable, turned TV on, and we watched Sanford and Son. So Sanford and Son was a show. Fred Sanford was from St. Louis originally. He moved there, and so in show business, he had moved to L.A. He ran an old junkyard, and he had a son that worked there with him, and so it was called Sanford and Son. And then they were down in Los Angeles running this deal. So it really crossed a lot of racial barriers. Cops would come in and there'd be this white guy and he come and said, right on. And, it was just all the period of time. So I loved Sanford and Son. So, but it was in LA and that's where I served my mission. So that was interesting. But then the next show that come on was called Chico and the Man. And they were all 30-minute sitcoms. Chico and the Man was filmed in East Los Angeles. That was all about East Los Angeles, the gangs down there. And Chico was a person who lived down there. He had all these paintings and stuff he had done, he and his people had done on building stuff. But when I was a missionary, me and my companion from Rexburg, Greg Thomason, me and him went down there one day in our white shirts and ties, our name tags on, and we're out there walking around, and Chico's over there where one of the paintings was. And we walked over and introduced ourselves to him. And he wanted to know what we were doing. We had cameras like this around our neck. We had 35mm camera, and we're out there taking pictures. And he said, oh, dude, who are you? So we're missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormon church. Well, why are you down here? Hey, man, we ain't ever seen nothing like this. I'm from North Carolina. He's from up in Idaho. We're taking pictures of our family. I said, they won't believe where we're at and what we're doing. He said, that's cool, man. And he said, well, I just want to make sure. He said, we had people come down here with gangs, then they want to come back and mess our pictures up. Stuff. I said, oh, no, man. I said, we just the gang of Jesus. That's all we are. And he said, that's cool. That's cool. He said, well, you just walk around, enjoy yourself, have fun. Anybody says anything to you, just tell them Chico's already talked to you and everything's okay. Well, I hadn't seen the show Chico and the Man. I met Chico. So we go walking down. Here comes this dude walking down in Chicano. Two Chicano girls, one on each arm. He's got I don't remember, I think his leg was all wrapped up. It was all damaged. He'd been, whatever been going on. Hey, man, what you doing down here? I said, hey, we're missionaries from Mormon church. I said, we already talked to Chico, and Chico said it was cool that we're down here taking pictures. Okay, man, Chico says, fine, you go ahead, enjoy yourself. I said, thank you, sir. We went on there. So here we are watching Chico and Man. I'm telling Darlene all about, I got something to talk about, right? We go to show it. So we started dating. I met her in November. We didn't start dating until February. And, but we started dating, and then every weekend, I'm leaving to go play baseball somewhere. And so I go see her on Thursday night. I go over to her apartment, see her. Then when I got back from playing baseball, I'd go see her on Sunday afternoon. And I'd usually see her on Tuesday at the library, and that'd be it. And that's something that we weren't really going out at all. And unless we were having a home game or something. I come back, my roommate said, we saw your girl. She was another guy at the Dairy Queen or whatever. And so anyway, we dated that fall. I left that spring. I went home that summer, and we kind of just left. She wanted to just be friends. She put me at the I want to be friend letter. So I went back to North Carolina. I called her on her birthday and wished her happy birthday. And that's the only time I talked to her the whole time. I got back to school in August and I get a phone call and she said, "Are you coming down to see me before school starts?" I said, "Well, I don't know why I would do that. Last time I went there, it didn't turn out real good. You and your mama got a little bit tired of me and wanted me out of there." I'd gone down and we were now playing a baseball game in Twin. So I rode down with some girls that were friends of my school. They lived in Twin. They dropped me off in Burley. So I spent the night, Friday night and Saturday morning. We're going to get up next year, going to take me down to Twin Falls. We'd play our double hitter, and then I'd be with the team and ride back to Rexburg. Well, we got rained on. Games got rained out. We couldn't play. So now I ended up staying there Saturday night. Went to church with them on Sunday. I'm there Sunday night because I ain't had no transportation, and they did not want me around. I called a dude up over in Rupert that I knew across the river. I said, "Man, when you going back to school?" He said, "I'm going back Monday." I said, "Dude, I need you to come pick me up. I got to get out of this house." So he came and picked me up and got back to Rexburg. Well, now here she's asked me to come. She says, "Well," and of course I'm driving this time. She says, "Well, why don't you come down and spend the weekend?" I said, "Why don't I come down, spend Friday night? We'll see how things go. If things go good, I might stay another day. If not, I got to leave you guys." She said, "Well, you don't have to be back to school Tuesday." Well, long story short was I got out there Friday. As soon as I seen her, I said, "I will be darned. I'm in the same problem I had when I left." And how does she feel? And what I didn't know is she felt the same way. She was Miss Non-Committal. She wasn't going to say anything. So Saturday, I said, "Well, I guess I better head." "Well, don't go back to Rexburg. We had a good time last night." I didn't decide to go to church for on Sunday. I said, "Well, I said, let me get out of here." She said, "No, I want you to stay here as long as you can." But then about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, on Monday, she says, "Okay, it's time. You need to go ahead and head to Rexburg." I said, "Well, I don't have to leave till about 8 o'clock. I don't need to be back before." I said, "I can get back about 11 or 12 and be fine." "No, you need to go." Without going in all detail, bottom line was she had a date at 6 o'clock that she'd already set up, and she wanted me out there. And so I finally got it out of her what was going on. And I said, "Well, that's fine. I'll just wait. I'll sit here and open the door for him when he comes in and welcome him here." And no, that wouldn't be very appropriate for you to do that. I said, "Well, you should have thought about that before you set the date up." "Well, he's just a friend. I'm just trying to be nice." So anyway, that's in August. By 1st of October, we started September, we started getting pretty serious. But we weren't going, we were talking about getting married, but that wasn't going to happen till next summer. And then I came down about the first, second week in October and I said, "If we're serious about getting married, we ain't going to wait until next summer." I said, "I want to get married in January." She says, "Okay." So I asked her to marry me. And so January 23rd, we were loaded up, we'll get married.
Well, that's a story.
Hey, when you make the sale, man, once the sale's made, the biggest thing about making the sale is to shut up and take the money. Don't sit there and keep trying to resell. You already got the sale done. So I had the sale done. So I said, "Well, there you go."
That's an incredible story.
That's how it happened. Geez, 49 years ago. January will be 49 years.
You have a favorite memory from your 49 years, Dios? Above everything else. Could be a happy memory, could be something you guys had to go through, could be anything with kids.
Well, so I will tell you this. It's funny. I don't know at the time that weren't happy. I promised her we'd come home every year. Start with when we first got married. 'Cause I mean, you pull this girl up out of Idaho, take her to North Carolina. You didn't have cell phones, so you didn't call home once a month, talk for 15, 20 minutes. It cost you $25 when you did it. And $25, you saw, I told you how much money we were making, so $25 is a lot of money. So you just didn't talk to home a lot. And so she didn't like the girls today where they talk to their mama every day on the cell phone, whether it be texting, calling, or both. And so bless her heart, she come back here and so mama took her underneath her wing and loved her, and she loved mama, and daddy's the same way. But so a year's up and we're gonna go back home. And I don't even know what happened, but we're gonna ride straight through from Deep Run to Burley. So we got about as far as Kansas City. So we've been driving for about probably 20 plus hours. We're tired. It's about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We got to Kansas City. And we got to arguing about something. I don't even know what we were arguing about, but it was from St. Louis to Kansas City. And I finally had about all I could take of it, and she'd had about all she wanted. I said, well, I'll tell you what. I said, when we get to Kansas City, I said, we'll just go to the airport. We'll buy you a ticket and we'll just fly you home. You can go there and stay. And I'll go back to North Carolina. And she said, well, if that's what you want to do, that'll be fine. I said, okay. I said, we'll take you to Kansas City and that'll be it. So we'd probably been driving it definitely quite. We're probably a couple hours from Kansas City. It'd probably been about an hour since that happened. She says, well, I just want one thing from the house and you can have everything else. I said, fine. I said, what do you want? She says, I want bed so I can remember all of our memories together. And I said, so you really want me to put you on a plane? She started crying. She said, no. And like, so I don't know what we just arguing about something. We're just tired. And so he said, well, maybe we'll go a little further. Let's see how it works out. So, 48 years later, right? But here's what's funny. Not this trip, but the last trip, we usually always go through Kansas City. We're going through Kansas City. She said, wasn't this the area where you're going to put me on the airplane? I said, yeah. I said, I think I'll put you on there right now this time. She'll start laughing.
How do you navigate moments of uncertainty, either in your career or in your personal life?
Well, I guess the overall answer is for either one is a lot of prayer. Ask the Heavenly Father to help me. Say, "Look, I'm definitely hadn't done things perfect and I've made mistakes just like anybody has, but I always go to the Lord in prayer and say, I need you to help me. And, you know, I think in our family life and stuff, it hasn't been too hard to navigate. But in the career part of it, it's really been tough at times because it seems like for me personally, I've had to always overcome the odds. Things didn't come easy for me like it has for other people I've watched, especially in the career aspect of it. You know, part of it had to do with my own personal not being prepared schooling wise stuff. I'd finished up at Rick's and made a decision not to go on and get my 4 year degree, and I had an associate degree. That was going to be enough, and done about 6, 7 years into my career. Well, so we left UPS and went to the farm. Well, in 5 years of being on the farm, everything went from here, kept getting worse till Dallin lost her dad lost the farm, and now I don't have a job anymore. I had plenty of work to do. I had jobs, but I didn't have a career. That's probably a better way to say it. When I couldn't farm on our farm anymore, I hired out to the neighbors. And I had worked for them doing stuff during the wintertime. So they all knew me and my work ethic. So they loved me. So I was sitting there riding the tractor 16 hours a day, plowing, plowing ground, planting hay, planting barley, hauling manure, whatever. I mean, I could work, but there wasn't no future for me in it. And I knew that I was just a hired man, but it was very helpful. But I mean, they were doing everything they could to, because they wanted me there to help them, but they knew I weren't going to stay. Maybe if I had been more serious about it, I won't stay. They might have, but I knew I weren't going. Like the one family I was working for, there's 4 boys. I weren't getting a piece of the action. Them 4 boys had it, and I definitely weren't going to sit there and work for them. I could work for their dad. I could work for one of the brothers, but 3 of the brothers, there ain't no way I'm working for them. That weren't going to happen. And so that's how I started looking for a career. So I come to work for Ecolab, and so, 5 years into it, I get promoted to district manager. Well, I'm sitting there at district manager and things are going good. I'm doing good, but I could, I've always had a good ability to size up the competition. And so I'm competing against the guys who do have college educations that also are well thought. Plus, I'm in Wilmington, so that would be considered a lower end market. And they're all in Atlanta and Charlotte and Nashville, and then other cities, Salt Lake City, whatever, around the nation. That's who I'm competing against to get the next job. So I said, well, one thing I can't afford to do is let education be a problem. So I went back. I got up with correspondence school. You didn't have online school. There wasn't no such thing. But before that, it was correspondence school. So I found a school in Louisiana called LaSalle University in Louisiana, and I got connected with them. So I ended up getting finished my bachelor's degree and then got a master's degree. So at least I had schooling done, had paper that showed I had a degree. So I eliminated that. But, I go out with our regional vice president, and, you go work with him at the end of the day. And he was like most of, they want to go to the bar and have even if they're just going to go there and have a beer and, and maybe two or three, but I didn't feel comfortable sitting at a bar. I'd sometimes go with them, but I didn't drink, so I'd order a Diet Coke and sit there and drink a Diet Coke while they're doing that. Or they want to go to the girly shows at night, and I'm not going to go do that, so I don't. And then I got people who I'm competing with, and they're going to do all that. So you sit there and you look at the VP of sales for Eastern US, and you say, well, if you were in his shoes and he's got this guy and he's got this guy and this guy, they're both equal doing work, and this guy goes with him when he gets off work, they go have fun. And this guy, he wants to go home with his wife and kids, and he's not interested, even if he's not at home. He don't want to go to the bar. He didn't want to do this. Who would you hang around with, and who's going to get promoted, right? Now, part of that's it is true. Part of it's perception on my part, but I had to come against those odds to be able to do that. But when opportunities came, I just kept working hard. I kept learning. The key was to write the numbers. If you don't write the numbers, it ain't going to happen. So I kept writing the numbers. And so when you go look at statistics, I was always out of 120 district managers, I was in the top 10, top 15 of the country. So, the key you learn real quick is your name's got to be up there in the lights. And then you got to spend some time with these people that are making decisions so they get to know you. And I started learning how to do that, put myself in position so that could happen. So, for example, I get the opportunity to go to the Philippines. That happened because I got to know one of the guys that became the vice president of Eastern Sales, and he and I became very close. And so as a result, when he got promoted to be VP of International for Asia, I sent him a letter. And I said, hey, I know now at the present time, you probably don't have any needs, but I just want you to know when the day comes that you have a need for someone in Asia, raising my hand, I'd love to go do that. So now you can look at it and say, well, here's a man who's got 5 kids. He's living in Raleigh as a district manager. And I got a guy over here that's got 1 kid or 2 kids, lives in Nashville or lives in here, wherever. And who would the company pay for to go? I'm a lot more expensive to have send than someone's got 1 kid, or he's a little older and his kids are gone. But that call came. So I went to the Philippines with our kids, and we go over there for 2 years. One of the greatest opportunities we had ever had. And so, I met a guy that did carvings. He could carve anything. So I took one of our yearly reports, annual reports. It had our CEO, Al Schumann, on the front of it. I'd interviewed with Al before I went to the Philippines. And so I had him take that picture and carve a statue about this high of Al. White shirt with the cufflinks on, the tie, the pants. Exact duplicate. I wrapped it up, got on an airplane in the Philippines. Guys were said, what's in there? So I took it off, and because they had a little store, and I'm flying first class. So there's a storage compartment up in front of these 747s, and I got it setting up in there, and I take it out, and so everybody up there, they're saying, what is this? I had a guy, it's kind of just a fun deal. I had a guy make this statue, this wood statue of our CEO. I'm taking it to him to deliver it to him. And so in the house, I got pictures where I was in Al's office on the 18th floor, giving him a statue of himself. He says, "I got cufflinks just like that." I said, "Yeah, you do." "Well, I got a tie just like that." I said, "Yeah." I said, "It's from your picture, Al." And, it didn't help me get promoted, but people knew I'd done that. He knew I'd done that. And then we got ready to come back. I ended up coming to K in Greensboro with our division there, but I was working with Pest, working in there. I knew a guy in Pest. I talked to him. He brought me in as a corporate account manager. But he told me that I couldn't be an AV assistant vice president. That can't happen for at least a year because we don't make anybody an assistant vice president bringing in. And 4 months later, they bring this guy who had left the company after 2 years working for a company down in Texas, and they bring him back as an assistant vice president of corporate accounts. And I said, "I don't understand." I said, "What do I need to do? Quit and then come back?" I've been here 13 years, been dedicated to the company. This guy left the company. You tell me you'd never make somebody an AVP without him working a year and proving himself, and you bring him back as an AVP? Tell me how that works. "Well, he was vice president of this rendering company down in Texas." I said, "It don't even match the same. That company's a little dink company. That's why he wanted to come back. Why would you think he'd leave a VP job?" "Well, we couldn't just bring him back and him not be an AVP. Plus, we're doing this because it'll help us to be able to get you promoted." I said, "Yeah, right." And so I knew I weren't long lived to be in the pest business. And I'm there at K. The beautiful thing was the general manager was a guy named Doug Baker. His right hand man was a guy named Mike Hickey. Those names won't mean anything to you, but Doug Baker became our CEO. And I personally got to know Doug really well when he was there at K. I personally got to know Hickey very well when he was there at K. And so Doug, he gets promoted to COO, then CEO. And so any promotions I'm going to get, Doug's got to sign off on them. So here I am sitting at K, and I finally got promoted as an area manager in charge of a third of the company. But we can't make you an AVP because we don't have AP status in that job description here. So a year goes by, and I got a guy that goes back for me, my boss, and I finally get made an AVP. 3 years go by, and we're going to do a division, so they're going to have a person going to take over the QSR part and a person take over the food retail part. And so I made it known really strongly I wanted to be the guy who was in charge of QSR. The general manager at the time, he and I had both worked we had a common denominator from Pest, and I got to know Steve real well. So he was in my corner. And so I did get the job. They know what to call me. And that job had always, the person who had held that job earlier had been a VP. The person in the other division, the food retail, that held that job that I had, he was a VP, but I can't be a VP. I'm an AVP. I'm assistant vice president. So it took 2 more years of working before I finally got promoted to the VP title. So to me, the part is this. Number one is you just never give up. You can get mad. It won't change anything. All you can do is go out and perform more. So here's what happened. We had a chance. I'd been there. I'd been in this position about 2-3 years. We're trying to sell the Wendy's business. We'd never had the Wendy's business. And so we didn't think we were going to get it, or I thought we were going to get a portion of it. Well, when we originally put automated dispensing in McDonald's for that powders and liquid program, Hickey and Baker, he had been general manager, Hickey had been the vice president of sales. It had a lot of disaster in it, and they had to fly around the country and meet with all the key owner-operators and key McDonald's people to save the business. And they did. So they know how critical it was to do a rollout and not have problems at McDonald's. That's the largest customer that Ecolab has. You cannot lose that customer. And so now here I am. I'm AVP in charge of, and we're going to do this rollout in McDonald's and make sure everybody's happy. So the short end of the story is this. We got Wendy's. I'll never forget. We got a phone call from Dublin, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, and from Dublin. Wendy's calls up and they give us the business. So I'm with Steve, our general manager, and we called Doug Baker, just who's now the CEO. We get Doug on the phone. Steve says, Doug, just want to let you know, we just got a phone call from Wendy's. Doug says, so how did that go? He says, we got the Wendy's business. Yeah, right, Steve. I know you got the Wendy's business. Did you get one division? Did you get what part of the country did you get? He says, no, Doug, we got all the business. BS, you ain't got all the Wendy's business. This is CEO, right? And he wants all the business. He says, there is no way that you got all the business. So Steve says, yeah, Doug, we got all the business. They all like to say this. Howard, you're Mormon and you can't lie. Is Steve telling me the truth? Yes, Doug, we got all the business. Next question, Howard, how are you going to roll all this out? I said, we're going to do it, Doug. I got a plan, and you'll see the plan. I said, we just got to get people. He said, you tell us what you need, you'll get it. So the long story short was we rolled out all McDonald's. We rolled out all of Wendy's in 6 months, 6,000 stores. We did McDonald's over a year. We never had a peak out of McDonald's. They were all tickled to death. We never had a problem compared 10 years prior. Wendy's, we never had a real problem. We'd have a little spark up there and we go take care of it right then. It almost went flawlessly. My name was put in to be made vice president. Doug Baker's the one that's got to sign it off, him, the board of directors, hands down, no problem. And that couldn't have happened if I'd have got pissed off back here at the other day and said, you know what, screw y'all. I'm going to go do something else.
It's a really cool story.
It's a true story. Changed our lifestyle.
Yeah. Did you have any dreams in your early 20s, early 30s that you've been able to accomplish?
I think the biggest dream was, well, the biggest worry was, which was also part of the dream, was we had 5 children. How am I going to educate all these children? When it comes time for them, when they turn 16, how am I going to afford a car? How am I going to afford the money they need for education and missions? Because I didn't have that kind of money. And I said, I don't know how we're going to do all that. All I know how to do is go out and work hard, work smarter, and figure out how to do stuff. And it's real interesting when you go back and look. So that was the dream. And when you look back, all of our kids have college educations. All the boys serve missions. So you go look today in Cameron, he's a chemical engineer and he works for a company that he loves setting, making formulas, making products. He worked for Ecolab for a couple of years. And when I got promoted to AVP, because of a nepotism rule we had at that time, he could not be hired by the company. They wanted him and they couldn't hire him. Today, that rule's been changed. If it had been 5 years later, he could have been hired. But he's with a different company and he's done very well with them and does very well through that. He's had some up and downs with family and marriage and stuff, but you know, financially he's been able to take care of his family. Brittany, her and her husband, obviously she's gone through marriage problems, but she's in a happy marriage with kids, and financially they're able to take care of the kids and do all the things we're doing. Christopher started an appraisal business, does exceptionally well. Colby works with him in that appraisal business, and him and Jennifer do well, and Brooke and Kent have done well. And, you know, the one that I always like to tell everybody about is that when you go look at Brooke, she comes home after 1 semester at college and says, I'm in love and I want to get married. No, you ain't in love and you do not want to get married. You need to go to school. After you've been going to school for a couple of years, then you can think about it. So you can see how much jurisdiction a daddy has, because that was in December and May she got married. So she marries Kent. Kent has got 1 more year of school to be finished. So she does her sophomore year. He does his senior year. Maybe he had 2 more years of school because they go 2 more years of school. She's her junior year. He's a senior year. He stays and goes to work, and then she finishes her senior year. And then during her senior year, she gets pregnant with Case because she wanted to have a baby at the end of school. But the thing that's interesting is after her freshman year, she was on academic scholarship for the next 3 years. And Kent had a scholarship from the community he was from that paid for his college education. So all their schooling was paid for. So the money I had set aside to pay for Brooke, I told her, I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll take the money that she would have had for schooling and I will put it, I said, I have an E-Trade account. I said, I'm going to take that money and just put it right into the E-Trade account. I said, you keep, here's the dollar amount. Now you know what it is and I know what it is. When you graduate from college, I will take the money that you had and we'll give it to you. You can open up your own E-Trade account and we'll transfer it from my E-Trade account to your E-Trade account. I said, now here's the deal. If the E-Trade account has lost money, I will still give you your full amount that you would have got. So if that was, I don't know, $8,000 or $10,000, whatever it was, I think it was going to be right at $10,000. I said, I'll take that $10,000. You cannot lose. If it goes down, I will still give you $10,000. That's yours. If it increases, I said, whatever it increases, that's what you will get. Well, it went up like 15% each year over the 3 years. So she got like a 45% bump in that money. And so I traded it over to her, and that's how she started her E-Trade account. Now, the funny thing is, one day I'm talking to Brooke, living out in the farm at Deseret Farms, and they were sitting there with I don't know, 8 or 10 couples, and the men, they start talking stock market and what stocks to buy and what the market's doing this. So Brooke, she knows the lingo. She just starts talking to them. So, well, I've seen that this particular one's done well. This has got this. And I mean, it's pretty obvious she understands what's going on. So she got done. Next day, she's with a couple of her ladies, their husbands were there, and they said, how do you know so much about the stock market? So my dad taught me about stock market. I've been playing in the stock market since I graduated from college. She told me, says, he took my college money and gave it to me, and he had an E-Trade account. He put it in mine. I've been playing stock market ever since. And, you just look at the kids, and that's when you're proud of them, when they're able to go out and have successes and raise their kids and do what they've done and stuff.
In your old age, what kind of hobbies do you enjoy now?
Well, I can't sit still. I got to be busy doing something. So just like this, I enjoy this. Got to get to reminisce, and I love to talk. So I think I got interesting stories to tell. One of the things I was going to do when I was still working, I had a guy who was in our HR staff that I became a mentor to him. I asked him one day, I said, have you ever thought about writing a book? He said, yeah. I said, would you be interested in writing a book about me, about my work history and my life and how and being able to be. We were never taught any of this kind. We were taught good ethics. We were taught how to live the law of the church. We were taught how to be good people. Mom and daddy knew that. They knew how to do that. But when you start talking about stock market, you start talking about really understand the intricacies. Daddy understood business pretty good. Mama didn't understand any of it. But she knew how to be good to people and how to work with them and stuff. And so I said, I just look at this and always say this. If I can be successful doing what I did and do, anybody in America could be successful. Anybody in the world could. I still believe that. I used to say that to the guy that really helped me get through and learn how to get promoted and helped me get promoted into AVP. And even though he retired into the VP part because he understood the political process and taught me how to do that, navigate through that. I used to always say that to him. He says, I'm going to stop you. I know what you mean when you say that. He said, you say it all the time. He says, but everybody's not willing to do what you're willing to do. And that's the key. The key is, what are you willing to do? I know I'm off topic, but I'm going to share this part. I flew all the time. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. So I could sit there on my phone and play solitaire, whatever game I wanted to play. I could read books that have nothing in it that would just be fun books to read. And I like to do that too. The word I learned was through all of this is discipline. And so I would read all the books that were out about how to manage people, how to manage a business. And what I learned was that when I go in and I would meet with the head guys in what we call the C-suite of organizations, guess what they were reading? Same books. Like my boss come to me one day and he had had one of our key VPs quit in marketing. She quit and gone back to the banking business where she was from. He says, I just lost this lady. And he says, do you know the number one reason why people leave a company? And I just read the book From Good to Great. I said, well, I know what the book says. I said, in the book Good to Great, it says number one reason people leave is not because of money. They leave because of their direct manager. That's why they leave. He looked at me and says, yeah, he said, I must not be doing a very good job. Huh. I said, I think you are doing a good job. But I said, I think you're too hard on your people sometimes. It's fine to correct them when they need to be corrected, but you can't beat them up all the time. And you can't hold them to the grindstone all the time. And it was real interesting because that's what he did to me. I'm sitting in a meeting one day and he's beating me up because on my expense report, he had saw that I'd taken one of my managers and his wife to Ruth Chris for dinner. Now, the interesting thing was it was less than $200. And if you know anything about Ruth Chris, you don't go in there and get out. You're going to pay somewhere between 50. Well, it depends on what you're doing. We had no alcohol. It was all just dinner and dessert. And this guy was running all of Canada for me. He lived in Alberta and he's flying all over the country. And he's not at home with his wife. And I took him and his wife to let her know, number one, we love you for supporting him. And to let him know we appreciate all the nights you're away from your wife. This is just a little bit of a thank you. Plus, it was the only darn restaurant it was worthwhile to go to right there in the city of Calgary where we were at, where I was staying. And so it was just a win-win-win. But we had a deal that said we need to cut back on how we spend our money. And he was trying to make a point. And I understood his point, but he really dug in. And I just got so tired of it. Because every Friday I got called in his office, my office right across the hall. He'd call me and he would just beat me up. And every Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock, I knew I was going to get beat up. And I'd had about all of it I wanted. And he started down this line, and I finally come across the table. I said, I don't know what your problem is. I don't know if you're trying to see, am I man enough to come across this table and jump in your face? Is that what you want? I said, because if you do, I'm there. And I raised my voice just like, except a lot louder. And I said, I'll tell you what we'll do. You go get Hank. He's our VP of McDonald's. I said, you go get Ralph. He's our VP of the Yum account. I said, you go get Donnie at SSDC. I said, you put their expense reports down here. And let's put my expense report down here. And let's compare and see who spent the most money this month. I said, I guarantee you, I'm lower than every one of them, including you. I said, I know how much alcohol you guys drink. I know how many cigars you buy on the company money. And I know where you go eat. And I said, I guarantee you, I don't spend the money you guys spend. I was hot. Boy, he sat right down in his chair. He realized he'd crossed the line. He started saying, I am so sorry, Mike. He says, it's not about you. And he was. He was getting beat up by all this stuff, and he was taking it out on me because I wouldn't say anything. And when I finally come across that, but it's the funniest thing. Me and him, we're tight. He ended up leaving the company because he couldn't navigate the real high political stuff. So he went and worked for a different company, but we still talk. He's been gone 10 years. So hobby-wise, I have people who will call me about situations in the company, and so we'll talk business. I love doing that. I love to work in the yard. I got to keep doing something all the time. So obviously we're at the water because I love to fish. I love everything about that. Chad can't understand why I don't fish every day. He thinks I should be out there every day for 8 hours a day. And I look at him and I say, Chad, if I'm home, I normally do fish every day. But I fish for 30 minutes in the morning. I go out on the dock and throw, or I'll go in the afternoon. A couple times a week, I'll get in the boat and go out and fish. If they're biting really strong, I might go out 5 days in a row. I don't fish on Saturday. I don't fish on Sunday. And most time I don't fish on Friday because that's when everybody else fishes. I don't fish on Sunday because I'm busy with church. I don't fish on Friday and Saturday because there's 15,000 boats out there. And so you got to fight amongst them. Plus, they figure out real quick I'm a local. So they're watching everywhere I fish because they figure I know where to go. And I don't want to catch fish in front of them because now I know I got other people want to come. They'll go tell other people they'll come. So I won't even go out fishing. I just let them go out and have fun. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I fish. I love doing that. I love helping my neighbors if they got a project, whatever to do, and glad I'm in position health wise and financial wise. I can do all those things, but those are my hobbies, and I'm pretty good at my hobbies.
It sounds like it.
I got picture for proof.
If you look back on your life, what do you want your legacy to be?
Well, I think in a nutshell, it's that he was fair, he was honest, he was truthful, whether that be with the kids, with his wife, or all of his fellow men. I'll give it as this type testament. So we have a lady in our neighborhood, her and her husband, when we were building our house, every day they would come by and watch what we were doing. I didn't know who they were. And I asked one of the guys that lived there in the neighborhood that I didn't know, I said, who drives the white truck, the man and woman that comes by? He said, oh, that's Steve and Debbie. And I said, oh. He said, he's the community snoop. He said, he's got to know everything going on. So one day they came by and they rode by the house and they drove down the end of the road. And they, in a coal site, they had to turn around and come back. So I'm standing in the middle of the road when they come back. He stopped and I went up to him. He rolled his window down. I said, I'm Mike. Who are you? He said, well, I'm Steve. She says, I'm Debbie. So every time they come by, we would talk. We got to know each other. Steve, they're both from California. She was born and raised in Maryland. Met her first. She's been married 3 times. He's been married 3 times. They're both on their 3rd marriage. She's never had children. And they lived in the Bay Area. And her second husband had a big trawler. They lived on that trawler. Steve liked boats. That's how she met him. So they got married and lived on a trawler and finally sold it and moved down to Southern Cal. And then they came to North Carolina out on a whim, saw some land, come and build a house and live there. And in one aspect, you look at them and say they're misfits. On the other, they love each other and they love being there. Built a home, built a nice dock, etc. Like one day they pulled up and I started talking that we're on her side of the truck. So I'm talking to Debbie. Steve, he don't smile. He don't very seldom his smile. You guys need to hush. We need to go have lunch. You're cutting into my lunchtime. And I turned and I looked at him. Of course, I ain't got to know him good enough. I could do it. I trusted Steve. Just sit there and be quiet. Me and Debbie's talking. And when we're done, then you can go to lunch. Debbie starts laughing. He won't say a word. He just shuts up and sits right there. Me and her finished talking. I said, now you can take her to lunch. Enjoy yourself. But he loved it. That's who he was. And I knew that. And I knew I could do it. And I weren't ugly. But I said it just like I said it. And he was fine. So about 2 years later, we're in California visiting Brittany. And we got a phone call. I got a phone call. And it's Debbie. And Debbie says, Steve's in the hospital. I think he's going to die. And to sure. 2 days later, she called me and he's dead. I talk to her every day. And 2 days later, he's dead. So about a week later, we leave and we're coming back home. And I get a phone call. We're mid-America somewhere. It's Debbie. I say, hey, Debbie, what's up? She says, when you and Diane get home, I'd like to sit down and talk with you guys. Would that be okay? I say, absolutely. So what does she want? So we got home and about a week or so got by and I said, Diane, I said, we need to go over to Debbie's and talk with her, see what she needs, what she wants. So we go over there to do that. So we get over there and she says, I want to ask you guys if you do something for me. I said, well, Debbie, we'll do anything we can for you. What do you need? She says, I want you to be my executors of my life and my estate. She says, I've got it all. There's nothing you got to do other than if I'm laying there and it's time to pull the plug, I want you to be the one that says, pull the plug, it's time for her to go. I said, you want me to do that? She says, yes. She says, and now don't you just execute the plan that I've got laid out for me. I got a guy that I'm going to give my house to, don't have any children. And that's what her and Steve talked about. So I turned down and said, she said, yeah. I said, we'll do that for you. So about 3 weeks later, she come over with the lawyer's paper and she says, my lawyer said to her, she says, you really know these people? Well, yeah, I know them as good as I know anybody in the community. And she knows me based on what I told you. She knows me because we'd never even been to her house at that time when I went. And she says, do you trust him? She says, with my life. And so she brought the papers over and the lawyer had them all filled out. We signed them. Here's the key to my house. And so now anytime she gets ready to do something, she wants somebody to talk, she'll come over. She says, have you got a few minutes so I can talk to you about what I want to do and see if you think she wants to bounce that off me. I'm her confidant that way, me and Darlene. And so that's the legacy, is that we live that type of life, that someone that we really don't have any connection to and stuff sees that we're good people and they're trustworthy, that they would trust us with their life. It's interesting she would do that, but we love her to death, and she's doing a cement project right now. She wanted to get something done, and so I got a guy that's good cement, and I called him up, and I said, Jorge, can you come do this for her? Okay, Mike. If you say so, I'll be glad to do it for her. And so he come over and do it. And the first thing out of Jorge's mouth, he did all our cement work at our house. I gave him a copy of the Book of Mormon because he's a good religious man. First thing he asked me as soon as he saw I gave him a hug, he says, you still busy in church? I said, yeah. He said, good. I said, did you read that book I give you? He said, not yet. I said, well, it's still waiting for you. But I mean, that's what the real life's all about. It's when you got those type friendships and someone that wants you to do that with them. So that's the legacy I think I want to leave anyway. You know our love is nothing but the blues, baby. How blue can you get? You're evil when I'm with you, baby, yeah, but you're jealous when we're apart. You're evil when you're with baby, you're jealous when we're apart. How blue, baby, how blue in your heart. I bought you a brand new Ford. You said I want a Cadillac. I bought you a $10 meal. You said thanks for the snack. I let you live in my penthouse. You said thanks for the shack. I gave you 7 children, now you want to give them back. How blue, baby, how blue can you get? Our love ain't nothing but the blues, baby, how blue can you get?